I'm freezing. Please let me in. I'll reward you." These were the words of the poor Apache woman. The sky above the mountains of northern Arizona was dark gray. It was low and heavy, like it might fall down. Snow had been falling since morning. It wasn't the light kind that stops quickly. It was thick snow that kept coming down, covering everything in white silence. The wind wasn't screaming. It was quiet but sharp, moving through the pine trees and down into the valley where the land was flat enough for someone to live. Samuel Carter had been chopping wood since noon. His gloves were stiff. His shoulders hurt from the cold that went right through his thick coat. He was 35 years old, with a broad chest. The war and a hard life had worn him down. Samuel lived here because it was far from other people. That's what he wanted. The cabin was his and no one else's. It was old and beaten by weather. The shutters were bent, and snow was piled high around the bottom. A year ago, he covered up the second window after it broke in a storm. 2 years before that, he buried his last dog under the big tree near the barn. No one visited him. There were no neighbors, just trees, ice, and his daily routines. He'd lived here since his wife died. That was almost 8 years ago. Their baby boy didn't make it through his second winter. After that, Samuel only went to town once each season. No one came out this far unless they were lost, desperate, or planning something bad. So when he heard the sound, that soft, uneven crunching in the snow, his first thought was to be careful. He stood up straight, axe still in his hand, looking hard at the woods beyond his fence. First he thought it was an elk. Then he thought it might be a thief or worse, someone looking for gold or a rider from the town on the trail. He didn't move, just listened, his back stiff, his boots half buried in snow. Then he saw her. A woman, thin, barefoot, wearing a torn buckskin dress that flapped at the bottom. Her legs sank deep into the snow as she stumbled toward the porch. One step, then another, her arms wrapped tight around her chest. Her hair was long and black, braided in one thick rope down her back. Her skin was dark brown, her face red from wind and tight with pain. Not a settler. An Apache. Samuel's stomach got tight right away. Not from hate, he wasn't that kind of man, but from what he knew, what he'd seen. Apache women didn't walk alone in white man's land in the middle of winter, barefoot and almost dead. Unless something had gone very wrong. He stepped toward her slowly, already thinking of what might happen. She could be bait. There could be others in the woods waiting. But as she got closer, stumbling now, her legs barely lifting through the snow, that thought started to fade. Her face was wrong for a trap. It was raw, tired, scared. She dropped to her knees in the snow, not 10 yards from his steps. Her hands pushed into the snow, her body swaying like she might pass out right there. He watched for another second, every feeling in him yelling to stay away, warning him not to get involved. He didn't know her, didn't owe her anything. He lived quietly and that quiet kept him alive. Then she looked up. "Please," she said. Her voice was dry and tight, barely heard, her lips cracked. "Let me in." Samuel's jaw got tight. He didn't move. "I can reward you," she added, quieter this time, teeth chattering. "Please." She had nothing. No pack, no boots, no weapon you could see. No frostbite yet, but it was coming. Her fingers were stiff and red. Her toes were deep in snow that must have burned like fire by now. Samuel thought about walking back inside and locking the door. He thought about staying quiet and letting nature do what it was already doing. Let the storm finish her. She'd be gone by morning and no one would know. No risk, no trouble, just the same quiet he always kept. But he didn't walk away. Instead, he stepped forward. He bent down beside her, slowly, watching her reactions. She didn't pull back. She was past fear. Her face twisted slightly, not in panic, but in shame. She wasn't begging now. She looked like she was waiting for judgment. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice even but low. She didn't answer. Her eyes closed for a second. Then she shook her head barely. Samuel looked around once, into the trees, into the hills, into the empty cold white wilderness, and decided. He put one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her. She was lighter than she should have been. Her body got tense against his chest, but she didn't fight him. She didn't speak again. He carried her to the porch, kicked the door open with his boot, and stepped inside. The warmth hit them right away. Inside, the fire was steady, built strong before noon. A pot of beans cooked on the stove. The room was simple, just shelves, a bed, a table, and the fire. It smelled like smoke and dust and pine. He set her down gently on the wool rug beside the fireplace and went to get the thickest blanket from his bed. She leaned against the stone of the fireplace, head tilted back, breathing shallow. Her eyes opened, trying to see the room. She looked at the table, at the rifle on the wall, then at him again. Suspicion flickered in her eyes, but it was weak, dulled by being so tired. Samuel knelt beside her and began wrapping the blanket around her legs. "Keep your feet off the floor," he said. "You'll lose them if they stay that cold." Still nothing. He checked her hands. Her fingertips were rough, the skin tight and red, but not black. Not yet. He poured hot water from the kettle into a tin cup, added a pinch of salt and a bit of the honey he'd saved from last spring, and handed it to her. "Drink it slow. If you throw it up, I'm not cleaning it." She took the cup with both hands. They shook as she tried to lift it, but she managed. Samuel sat back and watched her drink. Her throat moved with each swallow, slow and careful. Her eyes stayed on him, watching, waiting, but she didn't speak again. He didn't ask her name, didn't give his. It was enough that she was here, that he hadn't left her out there to freeze. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know who she was or what she wanted. But he did know this. No one deserved to die like that, alone in the snow. He'd seen enough of that during the war. Too many. He didn't want company. Didn't want conversation. But he also didn't walk away from people who couldn't stand on their own. Not anymore. The snow kept falling through the night. It covered the shutters in silence and buried the fences until only the tops of the posts showed through the snow. The wind pushed against the cabin walls, trying to get in, but the logs held strong. Inside, the fire stayed lit, fed every hour by Samuel's hand. The woman hadn't said another word since she'd been brought in. She hadn't cried either. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand anything, didn't even pull back when he unwrapped her legs and rubbed warmth back into her feet with cloth and water. She sat there, silent, leaning against the fireplace, her eyes dull but watchful. At some point, she fell asleep with her knees tucked up and the wool blanket wrapped around her body. Samuel hadn't moved her. He just laid another folded quilt beside her in case she woke cold. He watched her for a moment before sitting at the table with a plate of beans and bread. He ate slowly, listening to the wood crack and pop, watching the snow blow sideways across the window. His mind kept going back to her. What tribe was she from? Why was she alone? How far had she walked barefoot through that snow? The cold could kill fast out here. He knew that better than most. A man couldn't last more than an hour barefoot in weather like this. And yet she had made it to his door, barely, but still breathing. Around midnight, she stirred. Samuel looked over. Her eyes were open, but she didn't look at him. She looked at the fire, then at her feet, which were bandaged and resting above a basin of warm water. Her lips opened, but no sound came. Her fingers held the edge of the blanket a little tighter. "You're lucky they're still pink," Samuel said, not unkindly. Another hour and they'd have been gone. Her eyes moved to him slowly. This time she spoke, low and raspy. "I walked 2 days." Samuel frowned. "No boots?" She shook her head. "Taken. When they cast me out." He didn't say anything for a moment. He didn't want to push. But he needed to understand. "Who cast you out?" "My people." That hung in the room for a long time. He could have asked why, but the way she said it, the weight of it, made it clear. She wasn't speaking for sympathy, just the truth. Samuel nodded once. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. He stood, put some beans into a bowl, tore off a thick chunk of bread, and set it in front of her with a spoon. She took the bowl slowly, her hands still shaking. She didn't rush the food, just ate steady, every movement careful, like she'd been taught not to waste a single bite. She finished half the bowl before setting it aside and pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "What's your name?" he asked. "Iona." He let that sit a moment. "I'm Samuel." She gave a small nod, then turned her face slightly back to the fire. He watched her for a while, waiting to see if she'd speak more. She didn't. He noticed then what he hadn't fully caught before. Her clothes, what was left of them, were ceremonial and Apache-style dress, but the beading, the stitching, even the cut was formal. It wasn't travel wear. It wasn't hunting wear. It was something worn at gatherings, rituals, or important events. It was torn, marked with pine sap, and thin enough to let heat escape from her within minutes. "You were important," he said quietly. Iona's jaw tightened. Her gaze stayed on the fire. "I was his wife." "Whose?" "The chief." Samuel leaned back slightly. That explained the ceremonial cloth. The bone necklace. The sharpness in her posture even now. But it didn't explain why a chief's wife had been left to die in the woods. "No children?" he asked, already guessing the answer. She looked at him then, sharp, defensive. "No. Not with him." He didn't push. He just nodded once and leaned back in his chair. She took another small bite of bread, chewing slowly, not looking at him again. "You can stay here," he said, "until the weather breaks." She didn't thank him, just nodded once, quietly. He didn't expect gratitude. What mattered was survival, and she looked like she understood that too. Later that night, Samuel set up a spare bed across the room near the stove. He placed a second blanket on top and pointed toward it. She moved slowly, every muscle tight with cold and caution, but she stood on her own. He watched her test her weight on her feet, wincing, biting back pain, but standing. That surprised him. Most people would be in tears. He turned away to give her privacy as she lay down. Then, for the first time since she'd come in, she spoke again. "You're alone too." He looked back toward her. She wasn't asking, just noticing. He nodded. 8 years. She didn't ask what happened. He didn't tell her. They said nothing more. Outside, the wind picked up again. The world turned white beneath the moonlight. Inside, Samuel fed the fire one more log and settled into his own bed. The quiet stretched out. It wasn't warm yet. Not between them, not completely. But it wasn't cold anymore either. She was there, alive, breathing. That was enough for now.